Get that Omega out before the prince takes his last breath. The command cracked through the royal healing chamber like a whip, and Emily Carter froze with a wet cloth clenched in both hands, kneeling in a spreading puddle of spilled moon water beneath the marble table. She was not supposed to be there. Kitchen Omegas scrubbed copper pots, carried firewood, peeled potatoes until their fingers went numb, and disappeared through servant doors before anyone important had to look at them. They did not stand within 10 feet of royal blood. They did not breathe the same air as council lords, silver-robed healers, or the Alpha King himself. But the youngest prince of the northern packs lay on the white stone above her, small and still beneath a blanket embroidered with gold wolves, and no one in the room was breathing properly anymore. Not the healers with their trembling hands. Not the guards lined along the obsidian walls. Not Lady Victoria Ashford, who stood beside the king in a gown the color of winter roses, pretending her face had not gone pale. And not King Alexander Hayes, who had not moved once since the head healer whispered that Prince Noah's pulse had slipped away. The king stood at the foot of the table, tall, silent, and carved from terrible restraint, his black coat dusted with melting snow, his golden eyes fixed on the child, as if sheer command could force breath back into him. The air around him smelled of pine, storm clouds, and something sharp enough to make every wolf in the room lower their gaze. Emily lowered hers too. She knew better than to stare at an alpha king in grief. Grief made powerful men dangerous. Royal grief could crush a servant before anyone remembered her name. Why is she still here? Lady Victoria snapped, her voice polished and cruel. This is a healing chamber, not a scullery. A guard's hand closed around Emily's upper arm. She flinched, not from pain, but from the old habit of expecting punishment whenever someone important noticed her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, clutching the cloth against her apron. "I was told to clean the floor. Then crawl faster." Soft laughter moved through the council, thin and nervous, because laughing at a kitchen Omega was easier than looking at the dying heir. Emily swallowed the shame until it settled cold in her stomach. She would leave. She would go back below stairs where the ovens roared, where no one asked what she heard when wolves dreamed, where no one cared that sometimes the old lullabies rose in her throat without warning. Then it came. Not a sound in the room. Not a breath. Not a heartbeat. A whisper, small and lost, brushing the inside of her skull like a paw against a locked door. "Cold. Dark. Don't leave me." Emily stopped moving. The guard tugged her arm, but she barely felt it. Her eyes lifted to the child on the table, to his colorless mouth, to the faint silver shadow curling beneath his collarbone like frost under glass. The healers had said he was gone. The court had already begun to mourn him. But something inside him was still calling. Something small. Something frightened. Something alone. "He isn't dead," Emily breathed. The room went silent so quickly it felt as if the marble itself had stopped listening. Lady Victoria turned first, her smile gone. "What did you say?" Emily's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to bow, apologize, vanish. A kitchen Omega did not contradict royal healers. A kitchen Omega did not speak over nobles. A kitchen Omega did not tell an Alpha King that everyone around him was wrong. But the whisper came again, weaker this time, sinking farther away. "Don't leave me." Emily looked at King Alexander. For one terrible second, his golden eyes locked on hers, and the force of his attention nearly drove her to her knees. She should have looked away. Instead, she held the gaze of the most feared wolf in America and whispered, "Your Majesty, he isn't gone. He's lost." A healer scoffed. "Nonsense. The pup has no breath. No pulse," another said, though his voice shook. "No response to royal magic." "Because he can't hear you," Emily said, and the words trembled out of her before fear could stop them. "You're calling his body. He's somewhere deeper." Lady Victoria gave a cold little laugh. "And I suppose the kitchen maid can reach him?" Heat climbed Emily's face. The guard tightened his grip, but before he could drag her away, a note slipped from her lips. It was not even a song at first, just a broken hum, soft as steam rising from bread, the kind of sound her mother used to make when winter pressed against their windows and hunger made sleep difficult. The note floated through the chamber. Low, gentle, barely there. Every candle flame leaned toward it. Beyond the doors, a wolf gave a sudden, questioning whine. On the marble table, Prince Noah's smallest finger twitched. The head healer stumbled back. Lady Victoria stopped smiling, and King Alexander's stillness shattered by a single step forward, slow and lethal, his voice dropping into something darker than a command. Release her. The guard let go as if burned. Emily stood alone in the center of the royal healing chamber, apron stained with moonwater, hands shaking at her sides, while the Alpha King stared at her like she had become the most dangerous thing in his kingdom. Omega, he said, each word measured, quiet, and impossible to refuse. Make that sound again. Emily could not remember the last time a room had waited for her. Usually, rooms closed around her after the important people left. Kitchens after midnight. Laundry halls before dawn. Back stairwells where servants learned to fold themselves small enough not to be seen. But now the royal healing chamber held its breath around the sound trapped in her throat, and every eye in the room fixed on her as if a single note could either save the prince or condemn her. She looked at Prince Noah on the marble table. He seemed impossibly small beneath the gold wolf blanket, his lashes resting against cheeks too pale for a child who was supposed to inherit a kingdom. The silver shadow beneath his collarbone pulsed once, faint and ugly, then sank deeper. Emily's hands curled into her apron. I do not know if I can, she whispered. Lady Victoria's laugh cut through the silence like a sliver of ice. Of course she does not. A kitchen girl makes one strange noise, and suddenly everyone forgets centuries of royal medicine. Several council lords shifted, eager to believe her. It was easier to dismiss Emily than to admit the healers had failed. The head healer, an older man with tired eyes and moonstone rings on every finger, stared not at Emily's face, but at her mouth, as if trying to remember something half-buried. King Alexander did not look away from her. You made him move. I did not mean to. Then mean to now. The command was quiet, but it carried the weight of mountains. Emily's knees softened. Her wolf, usually a timid presence curled deep inside her chest, lifted its head for the first time in years. Not strong, not fierce, just awake. She took one step toward the table. The guards tensed. Lady Victoria lifted a hand. Your Majesty, allowing an untested Omega near the heir is reckless. If she contaminates the healing circle, the council will have grounds to question every decision made in this room. Alexander's golden gaze slid to her, and the entire chamber seemed to darken by a shade. Then the council may question me after my son breathes. The word son struck Emily harder than any command. Not prince, not heir, son. Beneath the crown, beneath the alpha power pressing against the walls, there was a father standing at the edge of an impossible loss. Emily reached the marble table and stopped inches away. She could smell the moon water, the sharp herbs, the cold mineral scent of royal magic, and underneath all of it, a child's fear. It had a scent too, like rain trapped in wool, like a candle about to go out. She closed her eyes. For a moment, the chamber disappeared, and she was back in a small farmhouse kitchen outside Boulder County, standing on a wooden chair while her mother kneaded dough at sunrise. Her mother's voice had always been soft, never pretty in the way nobles praised music, but steady enough to make storms feel far away. When the nights were cold and Emily's small wolf whimpered, her mother would hum a lullaby that seemed older than language. Emily had not sung it since the day her mother died. She opened her mouth. The first note shook. Someone in the council snickered. Emily almost stopped. Shame rose fast and hot, but then Noah's fingers twitched again, searching blindly against the blanket. The sound inside her head returned, so faint it nearly broke her. Here. I am here. Emily sang the next note lower, letting it settle into the marble, into the moon water, into the spaces the healers could not reach. The candles bent toward her. The frost on the tall windows began to melt in thin silver lines. Somewhere beyond the chamber doors, the royal wolves whined, one by one, answering a call they did not understand. Noah's chest lifted. Barely. A breath no deeper than the flutter of a moth's wing. Then it fell still again. The head healer whispered, Impossible. Lady Victoria's face hardened. It is a trick. Emily did not hear her. The room had narrowed to the child and the darkness around him. She sang again, and this time the sound did not feel like it came from her throat. It came from somewhere beneath her ribs, from a place that had carried every insult, every lonely meal, every winter night when she had been told Omegas were born to serve and nothing more. The silver shadow on Noah's chest recoiled. King Alexander took one sharp breath. Emily swayed, suddenly dizzy, but she kept singing. Noah's lips parted. A fragile sound escaped him, not breath yet, not a cry, but close enough to make every healer step forward. Emily reached out without thinking and brushed 2 fingers against the edge of his blanket. The room erupted. "Do not touch him," Victoria snapped. "She has no right." Emily jerked her hand back, terror flooding her body. But Noah's small hand followed, weak and trembling, and caught one strand of her apron between his fingers. The chamber went silent again. King Alexander stared at the child's hand, then at Emily, and something ancient and unreadable moved behind his eyes. "Everyone out," he said. The council protested at once, voices rising in panic and outrage, but Alexander's command rolled over them like thunder over a plain. "Everyone except the healer and the Omega." Lady Victoria stepped closer, her smile thin with warning. "Your Majesty, think carefully. If this girl fails, the kingdom will remember who allowed her near him." Alexander did not blink. "If she stops, there may be no kingdom left to remember anything." Emily's throat tightened around the next note. She looked down at Noah's tiny fingers clinging to her stained apron and understood with a cold, terrible clarity that walking away was no longer possible. The pup had heard her. The king had seen it. And whatever had taken the prince was now listening too. The chamber emptied in a rush of silk, armor, and frightened whispers, but silence did not follow. It gathered. It thickened in the corners, pressed against the moonstone walls, and settled over Emily's shoulders like a winter coat soaked through with ice water. Only 3 people remained beside the table now. The head healer, pale and trembling near the shelves of crystal vials. King Alexander at the foot of the marble slab, motionless except for the faint rise and fall of his chest. And Emily, a kitchen Omega with ash under her fingernails, standing close enough to the royal pup that one wrong breath could be called treason. Noah's tiny fingers still gripped the edge of her stained apron. Not tightly, not strongly, but enough. Enough to keep her there. Enough to make the king stare as if the world had shifted half an inch and revealed a door no one had seen before. Emily swallowed. Her throat already felt raw, as if the first notes had scraped something open inside her. "I need to know what happened to him," she said softly. The head healer blinked at her, offended by the question even through his fear. "You need to sing. I cannot call him back if I do not know what pulled him away." The words surprised her. They sounded too steady, too sure, like someone else had placed them on her tongue. Alexander's gaze sharpened. "Answer her." The healer looked down. The prince collapsed in the nursery after sunset. No wound, no fever. His breathing slowed, then stopped. Royal medicine did not hold. Moon water did not hold. Alpha command did not reach him. The last sentence cost him. Emily saw it in the way his mouth tightened. If the Alpha King's command could not reach his own son, something was terribly wrong. She looked back at Noah. The silver mark beneath his collarbone pulsed faintly, branching like frost across glass. It was beautiful in the way a poison lake could be beautiful under moonlight. Cold, wrong, patient. Emily lifted one shaking hand, then stopped herself before touching him. "May I move the blanket?" The healer inhaled sharply. "Absolutely not." Alexander said, "Yes." The room seemed to flinch. Emily folded the blanket down by 2 inches. Noah's small chest was still, his skin cool beneath the chamber light, and across his heart lay a thin shimmer of silver threads, woven so delicately they looked almost like embroidery. Emily's stomach turned. Not from horror, from recognition. She had seen that pattern once before, stitched into the back of an old cloth her mother kept hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Her mother had burned the cloth the next morning and told Emily never to hum after dark. "This is not sickness," Emily whispered. The healer's rings clicked softly as his hands curled. "Be careful, girl." Alexander stepped closer. The scent of pine and storm deepened. "Say it." Emily looked at the king, then at the child. Something is holding him between breaths. The candles dimmed as if the words themselves had weight. Noah's fingers slipped from her apron. Emily felt the loss like a little door closing. Panic rose in her chest. She leaned closer and began to sing again, not the single note from before, but the beginning of the lullaby. The melody was plain at first, almost too gentle for a royal chamber built of marble and power. It belonged beside kitchen fires, folded blankets, rain tapping on farmhouse windows. Her voice shook on the second line. On the third, it steadied. The silver threads on Noah's chest tightened. The healer made a strangled sound. Alexander's hands curled at his sides, but he did not interrupt. Emily sang through the fear, through the watching eyes, through the knowledge that if she failed, Lady Victoria would make certain the entire court remembered her name only long enough to curse it. A breath moved under Noah's ribs. Small, shallow, then gone. Emily sang louder, tears blurring the gold wolves embroidered on the blanket. She remembered her mother's palm against her hair, remembered the smell of flower and rosemary, remembered a voice whispering, "When a wolf is lost, do not shout. Give him a path home." The room changed. The air warmed by a single degree. The moon water in the silver bowl trembled, sending tiny rings across its surface. Behind the sealed chamber doors, the royal wolves began to whine in a low, aching harmony. Noah's lips parted. His chest lifted again. This time the breath lasted almost 2 full seconds. Emily swayed, dizzy with relief. But before hope could take root, the silver threads flashed brighter and pulled tight across the pup's heart. Noah went still, completely still. The lullaby broke in Emily's throat. Alexander moved then, fast enough that the candle flames bent toward him, but he stopped before touching his son, as if afraid his power would crush what little remained. His voice was low, rough, and no longer sounded like a king giving orders. Why did he stop? Emily stared at the silver shimmer, hearing now not only Noah's distant whisper, but something else beneath it. A second presence. Cold. Watching. Waiting for her song to open the way. Her skin prickled from wrist to shoulder. She stepped back 1 pace. Because something heard me. The head healer's face lost every trace of color. Alexander looked from Emily to the child, and for the first time since she had entered the chamber, she saw fear break through the gold in his eyes. Then, from the far side of the locked doors, Lady Victoria's voice floated in, smooth and bright with false concern. "Your Majesty, is the Omega still alive in there?" Emily's blood went cold, because at the sound of Victoria's voice, the silver threads on Noah's chest pulsed like they recognized their master. Alexander did not answer Victoria. He lifted one hand toward the chamber doors, and the heavy moonstone lock sealed with a deep, final sound that made the walls tremble. Outside, the council fell silent. Inside, Emily felt the silver threads on Noah's chest tighten again, reacting to the shut door like a spiderweb touched by breath. The head healer backed away from the table, clutching his rings as if they could protect him from what he finally understood. "That pattern," he whispered. "It is not a common curse." Alexander did not look at him. "Explain." The old man's voice thinned. "It was designed to anchor a wolf spirit outside the body. The body remains, but the child cannot return to it unless someone opens a path." Emily's pulse stuttered. "The song." The healer closed his eyes. "Yes, but if the path is opened from only one side, the singer becomes the bridge." The words settled over the chamber with terrible softness. Alexander turned to Emily, and for the first time, his command did not feel like a weapon. It felt like a wall being built between her and danger. "No," Emily looked up at him. "Your Majesty? You stop now." His voice was low, firm, absolute. "There will be another way." The healer did not speak. That was answer enough. Emily looked down at Noah. His tiny face had gone calm again. Too calm, the eerie peace of someone drifting farther from shore. She could still hear him, but barely, a small frightened whisper at the edge of her mind. The sound reminded her of her own childhood nights below the servants' stairwell, when she had learned that crying did not bring comfort unless someone cared enough to listen. "There is not another way," she said. Alexander stepped closer. "You do not know what this will take from you." "No," Emily whispered. "But I know what happens when everyone waits for someone more important to help." The words escaped before she could soften them. The king went still. The room seemed to hold its breath around the insult. But Emily was not looking at his crown or his power. She was looking at a child who had reached for her apron because he had heard a kitchen girl when the entire court had failed to hear him. She moved to the head of the table and laid her palm above Noah's heart, not pressing, barely touching the blanket between them. The healer made a faint sound of alarm, but Alexander silenced him with a glance. Emily began again. This time, the lullaby did not come easily. The first note felt heavy, as if she were lifting it from deep water. Her throat tightened, Her knees trembled. The silver threads brightened, then shivered, and somewhere far beneath the chamber, the royal wolves answered in a long, mournful harmony. The sound traveled through the floor into Emily's bones. It steadied her. She sang the next line. Noah's fingers curled. Alexander's breath caught, so sharply that Emily heard it through the song. The silver frost across the child's chest pulled toward Emily's voice, drawn to it, feeding on the path she opened. Cold crept into her hands. Her vision blurred at the edges. Still she sang. The lullaby filled the chamber with images she did not understand. Moonlit fields, white wolves running beside a river, a woman with Emily's eyes standing before a throne of black stone. The old healer dropped to one knee, not from command, but from recognition. Moonblood, he breathed. That line was not destroyed. Alexander heard him. Emily saw the shock flicker across the king's face, but she could not stop to ask what it meant. Noah was closer now. She felt him like a small hand searching in the dark. Come back, she thought, though she did not know whether he could hear thought or only song. Come back. You are not alone. The silver threads recoiled from his heart, twisting away from the warmth rising beneath Emily's palm. Noah's chest lifted once. Then again. A real breath this time, fragile but present. Emily's knees buckled, but Alexander was suddenly beside her, one hand hovering near her shoulder without touching, as if even in panic he remembered she had not given him permission. Enough, he said, rough and urgent. Emily, stop. She had not told him her name. The realization flashed through her dimming mind and vanished. She kept singing, softer now, pulling the last notes from a place that felt dangerously empty. Noah's eyelids fluttered. Beneath them, gold shimmered like sunrise behind storm clouds. The silver threads snapped back one final inch. The pup's eyes opened. They were the same impossible gold as his father's. Emily smiled before she could stop herself. Then the world tilted. The last thing she heard before darkness rushed up to meet her was Noah taking one small, stubborn breath on his own. Emily woke to the sound of crying. At first, she thought it belonged to the dream she had fallen into, a dream of moonlit fields and wolves running beside a river she had never seen. But the cry came again, thin and furious and beautifully alive. Her eyes opened to the blur of candlelight, white marble, and King Alexander Hayes leaning over the healing table with both hands braced on its edge. His face had lost its terrifying stillness. For one unguarded second, he looked only like a father who had forgotten how to breathe. Prince Noah was crying. Not weakly, not like a fading child caught between worlds. He cried with his whole small body, red-faced and indignant, his little fists clenched in the gold wolf blanket as if offended that death had dared interrupt him. The sound filled the chamber, sharper than bells, brighter than sunrise, and every wolf beyond the sealed doors answered with a rising wave of howls that shook dust from the ceiling beams. Emily tried to sit up and discovered she was on the floor beside the table, her back against the cold base of a cabinet, the old healer kneeling nearby with one hand hovering anxiously over a bowl of moon water. Her throat felt raw. Her limbs felt distant. Her palms were so cold she could barely curl her fingers. But Noah was breathing. That was all her mind could hold. Noah was breathing. The old healer looked at her as if she had become a ghost from a story he had feared since childhood. Do not move too quickly, he said. You carried more than a song through you. Emily did not understand him. She barely heard him. Noah's cry broke on a hiccup, and his golden eyes opened fully, bright and wet and unmistakably fixed on her. The room stopped. Alexander followed his son's gaze. Emily shrank back by instinct, shame flooding her even through exhaustion. She was on the floor in a royal healing chamber, apron stained with moon water and ash, hair slipping loose from its braid, no better than a servant who had forgotten her place. I am sorry, she rasped. I did not mean to collapse. Alexander stared at her. You brought him back. She shook her head, because praise felt more dangerous than blame. I only sang what he followed. Noah let out a distressed little sound. A nurse who had been waiting beyond the inner screen hurried forward, hands trembling with relief, and reached to lift him from the table. The pup's reaction was immediate. His tiny body stiffened, his cry sharpened, and a low, impossible growl rumbled. From his chest, everyone froze. The nurse went pale and backed away. Noah turned his head toward Emily again, his small mouth quivering, his fingers reaching through the air with desperate, clumsy urgency. Emily looked at Alexander for permission. The king's expression had turned unreadable, but something inside his eyes had softened and sharpened at the same time. He gave one short nod. Emily pushed herself upright with effort and stepped closer to the table. Her knees trembled so badly that the old healer rose as if to steady her, then thought better of touching her. She reached out only as far as Noah reached for her. The pup caught the front of her apron in both fists and pulled with all the strength his little body had left. Emily bent closer. "Easy, little wolf," she whispered. Her voice cracked almost beyond sound. "You are safe now." Noah stopped crying. Not gradually. At once. His breath hitched, settled, and then he pressed his damp cheek against her wrist with a sigh so small it nearly broke her heart. Alexander made a sound under his breath that no one in the room was brave enough to name. Emily looked up and saw his wolf staring through his eyes, fierce, stunned, and utterly awake. Noah's lips moved against her skin. At first, she thought it was only a breath. Then the old healer gasped. The child whispered one word, hoarse and certain. "Mine." The chamber seemed to tilt around that single word. Emily went still, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to understand how a royal pup could claim a kitchen omega in front of his father. The old healer bowed his head. The nurse covered her mouth. Behind the sealed doors, the wolves fell silent all at once, as if the entire palace had bent close to listen. Alexander stepped nearer, slow as thunder rolling over the mountains. Emily expected anger. She expected correction. She expected him to say that royal blood did not belong to servants, that children said strange things after fever, that she should be grateful and disappear before the council returned. Instead, he looked at Noah's hands gripping her apron, then at the faint silver glow beginning beneath the collar of Emily's plain gray dress. His voice was barely more than a breath, but it carried the weight of something ancient waking under stone. "Ours." Emily's heart lurched. The word did not sound like a king making a decision. It sounded like a wolf recognizing a truth the court had buried too deeply to erase. Before anyone could speak, the moonstone locks on the chamber doors shuddered. Lady Victoria's voice rang from the other side, sweet, controlled, and edged with triumph. "Your Majesty, the council demands proof that the Omega has not enchanted the air." Noah whimpered and clung tighter to Emily. Alexander's gaze turned toward the doors, and the warmth that had almost reached his face vanished beneath royal ice. Emily felt the silver glow under her collar brighten, hidden but burning, as if her own body had heard the accusation and begun to answer before she knew how. The doors opened to a wall of judgment. Council lords stood beyond the threshold in dark ceremonial coats, their silver pins gleaming like frozen stars. Lady Victoria waited at the front of them, hands folded, face composed into something almost tender, as if she had not spent the last hour trying to have Emily dragged from the room. Behind her, royal guards filled the corridor, and farther back, half hidden by shadow, the palace wolves lined the walls with their heads low and their eyes fixed on Emily. Not on the king, not on the healers, on her. Noah felt the shift before anyone spoke. His little hands tightened in Emily's apron, and a frightened whine rose in his throat. Emily placed one careful hand over his back, not daring to hold him fully, not daring to pretend she had any right to comfort a prince. "It is all right," she whispered, though nothing about the room felt all right. Lady Victoria's gaze dropped to that hand, and her mouth curved. How touching. She already behaves as if the air belongs to her. Heat climbed Emily's face. She tried to pull away, but Noah made a broken little sound and clung harder. King Alexander stepped between them and the council, his body a quiet barrier of black wool, broad shoulders, and barely contained alpha power. The air is breathing. That is the only proof this court requires. Tonight. "No, Your Majesty," Victoria said, sweetly enough to make the words sound like concern. "It proves only that something happened in this sealed chamber where no witnesses were allowed." A low-ranking Omega entered. The royal pup changed. A forbidden mark has begun to glow on her skin, and now the air refuses every hand but hers. Murmurs traveled through the council like cold wine through dead leaves. Emily's fingers flew to her collar. The hidden silver warmth beneath her dress pulsed once. Answering their suspicion with light, She could not stop. The head healer stepped forward, pale but steady. I witnessed the song. It was restorative, not controlling. Victoria turned her smile on him. You also failed to save the prince, Healer Morrison. Forgive me if desperation has made your judgment soft. The old man flinched. Emily felt the room tilting toward a story Victoria had already written. Kitchen girl, strange song, enchanted heir, threat to the throne. It did not matter that Noah was alive. To them, her power was more frightening than his death. One council lord raised his chin. Until the source of her ability is proven, the Omega must be contained. Alexander's voice dropped. Choose your next words carefully. The lord's face went gray, but Victoria moved first, smooth as silk over ice. Containment is not punishment, your majesty. It is protection. For the heir, for the kingdom, for the girl herself, if she is truly innocent. Emily almost laughed, but her throat was too raw. People always found gentle words for cages when they were not the ones being locked inside them. Noah began to fuss, his breath hitching in small panicked bursts. The silver threads across his chest, faded but not gone, flickered beneath the blanket. Emily saw it. So did Alexander. Victoria saw it too, and something bright flashed behind her eyes before she lowered her lashes. See, she whispered. The child weakens when she is near him. He weakens because fear fills the room, Emily said. The words came out before she could swallow them. Every head turned. Victoria's smile vanished. Emily's heart pounded so hard it hurt, but she looked at the council, at the guards, at the nobles who had never been hungry beside an oven or cold in a servant stairwell. All of you are surrounding him with suspicion and command. He is a child, not a throne. The silence after that was enormous. Alexander looked at her as if she had just stepped across an invisible line no Omega had ever crossed in his palace. Then Noah coughed, a small, strained sound that made all authority meaningless. Emily bent closer at once, humming the first note of the lullaby under her breath. The silver threads dimmed. Noah settled. The wolves in the corridor lowered themselves to the floor, one by one, as if the song had passed through their bones. The council saw. Their fear sharpened. Enough, Victoria said. She cannot be allowed to keep doing that. Guards moved toward Emily. Alexander snarled one word. Stop. They froze, but the council lord lifted a moonstone writ. By emergency law, if the heir's will appears compromised, custody passes temporarily to the council until investigation is complete. Alexander's eyes burned gold. For one terrible moment, Emily thought the room itself might break under his restraint. Then Healer Morrison touched the edge of Noah's blanket and went still. He lifted something from beneath the embroidered fold, something no larger than a quarter, wrapped in black thread and shining with a dull silver sheen. The chamber emptied of sound. Victoria's perfume turned sharp with panic for half a second before she buried it. Alexander stared at the charm. Emily felt the hidden mark beneath her collar flare hot, not with fear this time, but recognition. Noah whimpered and reached for her again. The council lord lowered the writ. Healer Morrison's voice shook. This was placed under the prince before the Omega ever entered the room. Lady Victoria's face became perfectly calm. Too calm. Then perhaps, she said softly, she had an accomplice in the nursery. Emily looked at the charm, then at Victoria, and finally understood. Saving Noah had not cleared her name. It had made her the only obstacle left. They did not put Emily in chains at first. They did something worse. They asked her to hand Noah back. The nurse stood trembling beside the marble table, arms extended, eyes wet with fear and duty, while the council watched to see whether the kitchen Omega would obey. Noah clung to Emily with both small hands, his face tucked against her apron, his breathing uneven but real. Emily looked at King Alexander, waiting for him to stop this, but his gaze was fixed on the black-threaded charm in Healer Morrison's palm. His expression had gone colder than the snowfields beyond the palace walls. He was thinking like a king now, not only a father. A curse had entered his son's nursery. Someone in his court had placed it close enough to touch the royal heir. If he moved too quickly, the guilty would hide. If he moved too slowly, Noah might fade again. Emily understood none of the politics, but she understood the child in her arms. Please, she whispered to the nurse. He is frightened. Lady Victoria stepped forward, soft and shining and merciless. Then soothe him one last time before the investigation begins. Noah whimpered as the nurse took him. Emily hummed the smallest note she could manage, and the pup's breathing steadied for 3 precious seconds. Then the guards guided Emily away from the chamber, not roughly, not kindly, but with the careful distance people used for something they feared might burn them. Alexander did not look at her until she reached the doorway. When he finally did, the gold in his eyes held a promise so fierce it almost hurt to meet. "No one questions her without me." Victoria bowed her head. "Of course, Your Majesty." Emily knew a lie when it wore perfume. They brought her to a moonstone holding room beneath the east wing, a small circular chamber with white walls, no windows, and a single bench carved into the stone. The air hummed faintly, pressing against her skin, muting the little wolf inside her until even breathing felt lonely. Hours passed, or minutes. She could not tell. Without Noah's hand in her apron, the cold returned to her bones. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to sing, because the walls seemed to be listening. Then the palace wolves arrived. She heard them before she saw them, soft paws beyond the door, bodies settling one by one in the corridor. Not guards. Wolves. Dozens of them. They lay outside her cell in complete silence, turning the royal prison into a den. Emily pressed her palm to the door. A low whine answered from the other side. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. She had spent her life being unwanted by people. She did not know what to do with creatures who had chosen to stay. The lock opened near midnight. King Alexander entered alone, carrying the black-threaded charm sealed inside a glass vial. He looked different without the council around him. Still dangerous, still royal, but tired in a way crowns were not supposed to allow. The charm was made with silver ash and old moonstone, he said. It was not meant only for Noah. Emily stood. What does that mean? It was tied to my bloodline. When he weakened, so did I, quietly, slowly, enough that by dawn, the council could have declared both heir and king unfit. The room swayed beneath her. Victoria. Perhaps someone behind her. Alexander set the vial on the stone bench between them. But that is not why I came. Emily waited. The mark beneath her collar had cooled to a faint throb. Alexander's gaze lowered to it, though the fabric hid it completely. The song you sang. Where did you learn it? From my mother. His face changed, not much, but enough. A crack in marble. Her name. Emily hesitated. Speaking of her mother in this room felt like setting a candle in a grave. Grace Carter. Alexander closed his eyes. He knew the name. She saw it before he spoke. Grace was not a servant line. She was descended from the first Luna healers. Moonblood women. They could call a wolf spirit back when ordinary magic failed. Emily shook her head. No. My mother washed linens. She baked bread. She was nobody. She was hidden, Alexander said. And so were you. The words landed softly, but they broke something open inside her. All the years of being called weak. All the warnings not to sing after dark. All the strange ways wolves watched her from tree lines and kitchen doors. Not weakness. Hiding. Before Emily could answer, a terrible sound rolled through the floor above them. A child's cry, suddenly cut short. Alexander went still. The wolves outside the cell rose as one. Emily felt Noah's voice slam into her mind, frightened and fading. Cold again. The king's hand closed around the vial. His own breath hitched, and when he coughed into his fist, a smear of silver-gray dust stained his glove. Emily stepped toward him, horror rising in her throat. The curse was not broken. It had only been waiting. Alexander unlocked the cell door and looked at her not as a servant, not as a suspect, but as the only path left through the dark. Emily, he said, voice rough with command and fear together. I need you to sing. They ran through the east wing with the wolves ahead of them, and the storm shaking the palace windows. Emily's bare feet were silent against the cold marble because she had lost one shoe somewhere between the holding room and the grand staircase, but she did not slow down. Above her, the royal bells had begun to toll, not in celebration, not in mourning, but in warning. One bell for the heir. One bell for the king. One bell for the throne in danger. Alexander moved beside her with the controlled speed of someone refusing to show pain. His face was calm, but silver-gray dust stained the edge of his glove, and every few steps his breath caught like the curse had wrapped a cold hand around his lungs. Emily wanted to ask if he could keep going. She did not. Kings lied when people needed them upright. Fathers lied even better. The wolves burst through the doors of the great hall first, and the sound that met Emily inside nearly stopped her heart. The entire court had gathered beneath the vaulted ceiling, hundreds of alpha lords, healers, guards, servants, and council members standing in a wide circle around a moonstone platform. Noah lay at its center, small beneath the bright ceremonial lights, while the faded silver threads across his chest glowed again with cruel patience. Lady Victoria stood nearby in white silk, one hand pressed to her heart, her eyes wet with perfectly arranged sorrow. "Thank the goddess," she breathed as Alexander entered. "The Omega escaped confinement. We feared she had run." Emily looked at her, and for the first time, fear did not make her look away. "I was brought here." Victoria's gaze flicked to Alexander, then to the vial in his hand. For less than a heartbeat, her face sharpened. Then the mask returned. "Then let the court witness everything." The council lord from earlier lifted his moonstone writ. "If the girl's song fails, she will be named the source of the enchantment. If it succeeds, we will test whether the heir's attachment is natural or compelled." Alexander's voice was dangerously quiet. "You will do no such thing, Your Majesty," Victoria said gently. "If she is innocent, truth will protect her." Emily almost smiled. Truth had never protected the powerless unless someone powerful chose to listen. But she was no longer alone in the servant stairwell. The wolves around the hall lowered their heads as she stepped forward. Not to Alexander. To her. The court saw it. The whispers began at once. "Kitchen Omega. Moonblood. Witch. Luna." The words circled like crows. Emily climbed onto the moonstone platform. The surface was icy beneath her feet, and the mark under her collar flared so brightly that silver light spilled through the plain gray fabric. Noah's eyes were closed, his lips pale, his small hands open as if he had been reaching for someone who had not come fast enough. Alexander stepped up beside her and lowered himself to one knee at his son's other side. A murmur rippled through the hall. The Alpha King knelt for no one. Yet there he was, one hand braced on the moonstone, breath uneven, gold eyes fixed on Emily with a trust that frightened her more than suspicion ever had. "Do what you came to do," he said. Emily looked at the crowd. Lady Victoria watched with calm certainty, as if the song itself were the trap. Perhaps it was. Perhaps singing would drain whatever strength she had left. Perhaps the court would twist even a miracle into a crime. Then Noah's voice brushed her mind, tiny and fading. "Miss Emily. Not Omega. Not servant. Her name." Emily closed her eyes and sang. The first note rose soft and low, almost swallowed by the vastness of the hall. Then the second followed, warmer. The third trembled through the moonstone beneath her feet. All around the room, candles bent inward. Frost bloomed across the windows and melted at the same time, silver water running down the glass like tears. The wolves answered in harmony, not howling, not crying, but carrying the lullaby in a sound older than language. The silver threads on Noah's chest lifted from his skin like smoke. Alexander bowed his head, one hand pressed over his own heart as the same dull shine appeared beneath his coat. Emily kept singing. Her throat burned. Her hands went numb. The mark beneath her collar spread down her wrist in branching silver light. In the center of the platform, the curse rose fully from Noah, a thin dark shimmer wrapped around a silver charm no one had seen, hidden beneath the platform stones. Gasps broke through the court. Healer Morrison seized it with a cloth and held it high. Black thread, white silk, Victoria's perfume. The hall turned toward her. Victoria stepped back. "That proves nothing." Emily's song changed. She did not choose it. The final line poured from her with the strength of a river breaking through ice, and the hidden charm cracked into ash in the healer's hand. Noah inhaled. Alexander inhaled with him. Father and son breathed together, and the moonstone platform blazed silver beneath Emily's feet. Noah opened his eyes and reached for her. This time his voice carried through the hall, small but clear. "Mama." The word struck the court harder than any command. Every wolf in the great hall dropped to the floor. Then the guards. Then the healers. Then, one by one, the council lords bent their knees until only Lady Victoria remained standing, pale and shaking before the girl she had called Kitchen Ash. Emily could not move. The silver mark had reached her wrist now, forming the ancient Luna crest in living light. Alexander rose slowly, still on the platform, still breathing because she had sung him back from the edge with his son. He turned to face the court, but his hand hovered near Emily, not claiming, not commanding, simply guarding. His voice filled the hall, deep and absolute. The heir has chosen. The wolves have witnessed. And the bloodline you tried to bury has answered. Then he looked directly at Victoria. Now we find out who was afraid. Of a kitchen Omega's song. Lady Victoria did not run. She stood beneath the blazing moonstone lights with every wolf in the great hall bowed around her and tried to smile as if the world had not just turned against her. But fear has a scent, and every wolf in the room could taste it now. Sharp, bitter, bright beneath her winter rose perfume. Healer Morrison held the cracked charm in one hand and the torn strip of white silk in the other, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. This fabric came from the royal nursery linens. The thread was treated with silver ash before sunset. Whoever placed it needed access after the prince was put to bed. Victoria lifted her chin. Many people have access to the nursery. Alexander's gaze did not move from her face. Only 3 people were allowed near Noah after the evening bell. His nurse, his healer, and the woman the council wished me to marry before the next full moon. A shiver passed through the court. Victoria's perfect mask fractured. I wanted stability for the kingdom. You wanted the throne close enough to touch, Alexander said. His voice was calm, and that made it more terrifying than anger. Emily stood very still beside Noah, one arm around the child because he refused to let go of her, the other hand pressed over the glowing Luna mark at her wrist. The light had softened now, no longer burning through her skin, but warming it like sunlight after a long winter. She should have felt victorious. She should have looked at Victoria and felt the sharp sweetness of revenge. Instead, she looked at the woman's shaking hands and felt only tired. All that cruelty, all that fear, all to keep a kitchen girl from singing a song she had never asked to inherit. The council lord who had held the emergency writ lowered his head. Your Majesty, Lady Ashford must be confined until formal judgment. Victoria turned on him. You were all part of this. You all wanted the Omega gone. The words fell into the hall like stones dropped into dark water. Several council members went pale. Alexander did not need to raise his voice. Names. Now. Victoria's silence lasted 5 seconds. Then 10. Then Noah made a small frightened sound against Emily's shoulder, and the sound changed the air more than any threat could have. Emily bent her head and whispered, You are safe, little wolf. Noah's fingers curled in her dress, and his breathing settled. Across the platform, Alexander watched them, and the hard line of his face eased just enough to reveal the grief beneath the crown. Not weakness. Wound. He had almost lost his son. He had almost lost his kingdom. And the court had nearly convinced him to lose the one person who had heard Noah when power could not. Guards escorted Victoria away, not with spectacle, not with cruelty, but with the quiet finality of a door closing on an old lie. One by one, the implicated council members were ordered to surrender their seals. The great hall remained bowed until Alexander turned back to Emily. She lowered her eyes by habit. The movement made his expression sharpen with something like pain. Do not do that, he said softly. Emily froze. Your Majesty? Do not make yourself small in a room that is standing because of you. The words moved through the hall, and for the first time in her life, no one laughed when Emily stood at the center of attention. No one called her Ash. No one told her to crawl faster. The wolves lifted their heads, golden eyes calm and certain, as if they had known all along what the court had refused to see. Alexander stepped down from the moonstone platform, then turned and offered his hand. Not to command her down, not to claim her before she understood what the glowing mark meant. Simply to help her descend while Noah slept against her shoulder. Emily stared at that hand. A king's hand. A father's hand. A man's hand held out to a woman who had been taught never to accept anything from power except orders. Slowly, she placed her fingers in his. His palm was warm. Steady. The Luna mark at her wrist glowed once, and the wolves answered with a low, reverent sound that filled the hall like distant thunder over the Rockies. Alexander faced the court. Emily Carter is under the protection of the throne. No one will drag her from a room again. No one will silence her song. No one will decide her place but her. Emily's breath caught. Because he had not named her mate, queen, or possession, he had given her safety first, choice first, dignity first. And somehow, that shook her more deeply than any crown could have. Dawn reached the palace windows as the storm outside finally broke. Pale gold light spilled across the obsidian floor, over the bowed wolves, over the discarded council seals, over the small child sleeping peacefully in Emily's arms. She looked down at Noah and hummed the last line of her mother's lullaby, soft enough that only he and Alexander could hear. The pup smiled in his sleep. Alexander stood beside her, close but not crowding, his shadow no longer a threat but a shelter. Beyond the glass, snow slid from the pine branches, and the first clear morning in weeks opened over the northern packs. Emily had entered the chamber as a kitchen omega with ash on her apron. She left it with the air in her arms.